I spent 7 hours picking dirt and skull out of your brain. So January in the Northeast is a tough time. Living in the Northeast, roads are terrible. Everything's covered in salt. You get a lot of ice, and it's just gray and cold all the time. And I don't know why I've been there for so long, but I continue to put myself through these terrible winters. And one particular day, I have a very special relationship with, and that's Martin Luther King Day. For whatever reason, I'm lucky to be here right now after a couple Martin Luther King days. The most recent terrible Martin Luther King Day was 2018. I was home. I was hanging out at my house. It was a Monday evening. Didn't have a lot going on. A neighbor came over on a Polaris Ranger and asked me what I was doing. And I said nothing. She said, well, come on over for dinner. And she was there with her daughter and her cousin and another friend. And so I hopped on a dirt bike, went through a field and got to a cow field that had a gate on it. They went. I opened the gate for them. They went through. I closed the gate behind them, and I was speeding off to open the gate at the other end of the field. I grew up riding dirt bikes and ATVs in fields, and we used them as transportation, getting from one house to the next. And we lived in farm country, and the farm I was on was 25 acres, and the farm I was going to might have been 250 acres, and through some woods. It's not like I was aggressive motocross riding. I have gear for that. I have padded back protector and helmet and all the riding gear, riding boots. But when you're just going from A to B, I wasn't wearing a helmet. And I don't really remember much after that point. But the next thing I do remember, I was in a very bright room, and I kind of was dazed and didn't know why I was there. But I recognized my neighbor, and he asked how I was, and I think I said I was okay. And he said, well, I have your mother on the phone, and I just want you to talk to her. And she sounded worried, and I said, no, I'm fine, everything will be okay, and don't worry about me. And handed the phone back, and he called my sister, and I spoke to my sister. But what had happened was I had an unplanned dismount from a motocross bike, and to the best of my understanding of the injuries that I sustained, I think I got high-sided, which is when the bike sort of slides out and compresses and then catches and you get tossed. So yeah, when I hit the ground, it was like, people are like, they think when I tell them I had a motorcycle accident, they think I must have been on a street bike or something, and you must have really done some damage. But it was just a dirt bike in a frozen field, and when the dirt turned to be like concrete when it was wet and then froze. Some of the injuries I sustained in that incident were a separated AC joint. So I have this goofy shoulder bone that sticks out here. I broke 4 ribs. I fractured 3 vertebrae in my neck. And then I think the first bone that I've ever broken, and one in that injury, was my skull. I sustained multiple skull fractures. So after I spoke to my mother and my sister, they induced me in a coma. And I sat in the ICU. In a coma for about a month. So that was January of 2018. When I came out, my dad was calling me Spalding because the staples that I had in my head, holding my head together and holding the titanium plates that I now have in my head, looked like the stitching of a Spalding baseball. I guess you could call my recovery nothing short of miraculous. Even my brain surgeon said, do you know how lucky you are? And I said, how lucky is a guy that has multiple skull fractures and breaks a whole bunch of bones? He said, I spent 7 hours picking dirt and skull out of your brain. Anyway, here I sit. I think about within 6 months, I had put back on 40 pounds after having lost 20 in the hospital. So yeah, that was Martin Luther King Day 2018. And then the previous Martin Luther King Day, which nearly took my life, was 2005. I was at a friend's house. We had a little party, a bunch of people over, as you do, on a Sunday night before Martin Luther King Day. And as I usually am one of the first people up, I thought it'd be a nice thing to run out in the morning and get everybody bagels and cream cheese and bring it back to the house where everybody was, bodies were strewn like Gettysburg all over the place when I had left in the morning. And so at the time I had a 1979 930 Turbo, the Widowmaker that is known for getting squirrely in the rear end and you know, hitting things in reverse when you lose them, and killing people anyway. So I got out that morning, and there was a very, very light trace of snow on the ground. Most of it had been absorbed by the salt on the roads, but I was headed up this main road in New Jersey. It was maybe a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit, and I was going around this right-hand turn. And there was enough tree coverage that the ice and snow that had fallen the night before hadn't burned off by the sun. And I went back and looked at temperatures that day and found out that it had never gotten above like 22 degrees that entire day. And so this was around 10 o'clock in the morning. So I was going, and as you know, an old turbo, they love cold air, and they make a lot more horsepower when it's nice and cold out. And so I might have been going a little bit more than 50, but nothing egregious. And I go around this curve, and I feel the back end start to go. And you know, I was on summer tires, and it was 20 degrees, which is just a recipe for disaster as it is. And driving the Widowmaker as I was, you know, things started to lose control. And so now I'm starting to drift into the oncoming lanes. I'm trying to get this thing back together, and there are cars coming the other direction. And I learned from driving on the track that when you start to lose control and you're not gonna recover, it's both feet in. Put the clutch and the brake in, and just, you know, hope for the best. And so as the engine's in the rear of the car, this thing starts to turn, I start to rotate and counter steer, and I'm just trying to slide through a gap in traffic, oncoming traffic. And I'm looking, there's an embankment on the other side, and there's just, you know, brush and shrub, and I'm thinking that, man, I love this car, and this isn't gonna be good. And I just kind of said to myself as I'm, you know, sliding off the side of the road and on the other side, I'm just like, don't hit anything hard. And the last thing I remember seeing is a telephone pole. And I remember just kind of shutting my eyes, and I don't know what happened after that, but I'm pretty sure that I had dove toward the passenger side of my car. And for whatever reason, maybe just because I wasn't going far, I didn't have my seatbelt on. And next thing I know, I'm standing outside my car, and the entire windshield was, you know, 20 feet away, and I had a radar detector that was suction cupped to the windshield. And now that thing had, when the windshield had left, it had snapped because it was plugged into the cigarette lighter, and it wrapped itself around the side mirror, and the car was totaled. It was a banana around the telephone pole. I had actually hit the telephone pole so hard with my driver door that I broke the telephone pole. And I'm out walking around next to the car, just sad that I've destroyed the thing. And, you know, seconds later, a cop comes up to me, and he says, "Where's the driver?" And I said, "I'm the driver." And he said, "No, the driver's dead. I need to find the driver." And I said, "Officer, I was driving the car." And he's just in disbelief and tries to tell me that that's not possible, and there has to be another person that's, you know, dead or badly injured. And there wasn't. So then an ambulance comes, and they tell me to lie down. And like I said, it's maybe like 18 or 19 degrees in the morning, and they had me lie down on the road, on a relatively busy road, because they're going to put me on one of these wooden stretchers. And so I'm lying there like, you know, I can just walk into the back of the ambulance and sit in the chair. Like, no, you're injured, and you're who knows what's wrong with you. And I'm just thinking to myself, this is all ridiculous. And so I'm lying down on this freezing cold road, and they're moving me from the side of the road onto this stretcher. And this woman reaches down, you know, toward my head, and is trying to be gentle with the way she's touching me to move me over, and grabs the back of my neck, and I scream. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Your hands are so cold." So anyway, I walked away from that incident with a contusion, which was a little bruise behind my ear, and a little bruise on my thigh, and a totaled 930 turbo, which I was really sad about. I bought the car back from insurance for $6,000. I sold the motor for that car for, I think, $6,500, and parted the rest out of the car, and turned it into about a $20,000 profit by the time I was done, but used that to buy another 930 turbo. This Martin Luther King Day, I think I'm just going to hang out inside and maybe watch a movie in a padded room, and hang out with my dog or something.
Shrewd negotiation starts with finding the right car, and the best way to do that is with Autotempest.com. Autotempest allows you to search nationally through all the major listing sites with one search. Autotempest, all the cars, one search.